Okay, we are back with the Crazy Courage podcast once again. And surprise, I have another fun guest that is willing to talk to me and tell me her story. It's fantastic. Dr. Priya Nalkur is joining us. She said, I'm privileged enough to call her Priya, so I'm going to do that today. And she has formed the Roundtable Institute, which sounds really cool because it sounds like it's medieval and like a really great council of people getting together. They specialize in executive leadership development, which is always needed these days. So I'm going to let Priya, which I'm allowed to call her, explain what that means and what she does at the Roundtable Institute.
Thanks, Nick. Well, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. I'm really excited to have a dialogue with you.
Awesome.
So it's funny that you said that it's like medieval. Well, I've thought really long and hard about the name of this company. And the reason it's called Roundtable is because I want my clients to come together and leave their power at the door, leave like their stories, leave their baggage at the door so that we can all be on a level playing field and have a really productive conversation together, like in a safe, courageous space. And we have a team of about 30 coaches and facilitators. It wasn't always that big. It started out in 2016. It was just me. And I started the company the day after Donald Trump was elected here in the United States. If I could just be honest, like socio-political environment in North America was changing drastically in 2016. I was concerned that the voices of women and minorities were going to be categorically dismissed. And I wanted to do something about it. And I had a track record of good coaching as a professional executive coach. So I felt like, okay, it's time to start my company. So it was just me for a few years. And then in 2020, we had the pandemic. Here in the United States, we had the murder of George Floyd. Again, it was another socio-political inflection point. And I'd been like running the ship of leadership development and helping leaders maximize their potential, helping companies with workshops on leadership development, executive presence, emotional intelligence, these sorts of things. And I got a phone call from a CEO, and he said, I'm really concerned about our Black employees, and I am a white, straight man, and I don't know what to do. Can you help? And
So sorry, I'm going to stop you there real quick. What kind of concerns were we talking about?
well, he was concerned that he wasn't hearing from his Black employees and that they felt unsafe at work after the murder of George Floyd. And he wanted to provide them a space where they could feel safe and that their concerns around racial equity in the United States were going to be heard at his workplace. But he was really scared, didn't know what to do. And I had a history of dealing with racism myself. And I've like always been interested in reading about it and said, okay, we can help you. I think we can do this through the lens of leadership, inclusive leadership. And we started working together. And that program was so effective that he started with the leadership team to help them build skills of inclusive leadership. That was so effective that he said, okay, let's do this company wide. And I was like, oh my gosh, we've never done anything that big. He said, okay, let's try it. He said, I have faith in you. You have faith in us. Let's do this. Partner together. And so that's when I had to build a team. And I built my team then. And that project went so well. And since then, we've done several enterprise level projects with companies as large as, 10,000 to teach them the skills of inclusive leadership, to help them become more inclusive workplaces where people really feel like they belong. They know how to create courageous, safe spaces. They know how to lead effectively. Doesn't mean it's always perfect, but they know how to repair when they do make mistakes. This is not the sort of thing that you plan to do when you start a company, but we've been responsive to our clients' needs, and it brought us to this place, and I'm really proud of where it has led us so far.
Yeah, that's what you have to do. The journey takes you where it takes you, right? You can't fight it. The best things are discovered when you follow the journey instead of trying to force it into a square peg in a round hole kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. And had this vision that we were just here to teach people kindness. And we were here to teach people how to have productive, warm, compassionate, empathetic conversations so that they could be more productive at work and more fulfilled. And it turned into this other thing about diversity and equity, inclusion. Like, turns out modern leadership is very much about that, as much as it is about inspiring people and offering places for people to transform and maximize their potential and be the leaders they're meant to be.
Wow, fantastic. So the Roundtable Institute now is a team. It's not just you. You have a whole team of people, right? How many people do you have on your team now?
We have about 26 up to 30, depending on, who wants to play and who doesn't. We have coaches, facilitator all around the world. That was one thing that was really important to me. I wanted to build a very diverse team. I wanted us to be able to coach and facilitate in multiple languages across different time zones and cultures, because that's what the market was asking us to do. And I wanted my clients to feel as though they were represented by our team and that our team could understand them. So I'm very proud to say that we have a diverse team across social identity, geography, language, age, all sorts of things. And I hope that we continue to maintain that diversity.
Well, it sounds like such a great initiative for sure. Now, and you had no idea that this is where you'd end up when you started off?
No way. Like, I didn't want to run a team. I was busy helping other people run their teams, right? And in 2020, when I started to build my team, I was like, oh, I get it. I get what the universe is telling me. It's time for me to take everything I've been teaching other people and turn it on to myself and practice what I preach. And so it was a real test for me can I manage a team? Can I manage a business? I have no business background. I've never worked in a corporation. I don't have any formal business training. So, like, being an entrepreneur really had to come from my heart, not from my head. And like, a lot of the work I do as a psychologist really comes from my head. And this was like a heart project. It was like, okay, if we're going to serve these clients at this level, then I want a team of A players. I want to pay them really, really well. I want them to feel that they're valued, and I want a team of people that I can learn from, and not just like coach and teach. I want to learn from them, and so I hope that that's what we built. I hope that everyone on the team is able to say that I can certainly say that I love them and I learn a lot from them, and they challenge me and they push me, and I think we can have those really hard conversations. And I love being able to tell my clients that we can have those conversations.
And that's it, right? It's not just surface stuff, like hard conversations. Those are the important ones. That's how you get things done. Is that right?
Well, if you think about the last hard conversation you've had, sometimes we walk away feeling like it was more messy than it started. And we're like, oh gosh, I've made more of a mess, right? But every time we have that conversation, we either learn something about ourselves or the relationship that we're in. Hopefully we learn both. So it makes us better people to have these hard conversations. It makes us more courageous. It makes us more vulnerable. It builds deeper connections, even if we don't solve the problem in front of us. It builds our toolkit to speak and to influence each other. And with that awareness, we can always come back and repair and restore and rebuild and find the solution we need to get to. But if we're prioritizing our learning and the relationship, like, we're going to get there. We're going to become better people. We're going to grow and we're going to develop along the way. So I'm a big fan of speaking your truth while also recognizing that nobody has a monopoly on the truth. And we're here to learn from each other and to give to each other.
And that's why you want people to step into whatever room or space and leave the baggage at the door, leave the egos, leave all that preconceived notions, leave it all at the door, and let's tear down and build it back up.
Yeah, which is easier said than done, right? It's a very theoretical concept to leave your ego at the door, okay? I actually love being able to facilitate when the power dynamics get ignited in the room, and they do, right? And to be able to have a conversation, identify the power dynamics, grapple with them, debate through them, get really messy with them, and then leave the room saying, okay, like, that was therapeutic and that was productive. And I learned something about myself because I came in with an open mind. I came in not needing to be right, not needing to win, and not willing to listen and willing to be open to other perspectives.
So, okay, in theory, that sounds awesome. And it sounds like that's how it should work every time.
Yeah.
Is it that simple?
No, of course not. Right? Like it's
That-
actually incredibly messy, right? So I just did a session a couple of days ago with a group who came to me with some very strong tensions, conflicts, and polarities. And I told them, I can't promise you that we're going to move the needle on this conflict, but I can promise you that we're going to lower the waterline and see what's hiding under the surface and
Whoa.
identify it and name it. And then it's up to you. Like, I'll give you all the tools and I'm here to provide the space to work through it. It's totally emergent. Humans are unpredictable, right? Especially when
Yeah.
you get them in groups. We did this thing and, you know, I have to show up with a lot of courage because as a facilitator, people are going to feed off of my energy. So if I'm nervous, they're going to be nervous. If I'm confident and certain, and I show up with a sense of humor and warmth, that's how I show up. Not all my facilitators show up that way. That's what works for me. They're going to be willing to be open, non-judgmental, warm, compassionate as well, right? At least experiment with that. So we got real messy in this session, right? People started throwing arrows at each other, metaphorically.
Yeah.
And
Okay, good.
and then lowering the waterline means I'm going to constantly look for people to name the elephant in the room, the thing that we keep sweeping under the rug and tripping over and falling flat on our faces over, but we don't like pick up the rug to like remove the thing. And finally somebody said, I'll tell you what, I don't feel safe saying what's really on my mind in this group because every time I have in the past or every time anyone else has, they've gotten shamed or punished or somehow reprimanded. And boom, that was the turning point because other people started to say, gosh, I had no idea. Who else feels that way? And what am I doing to cause that kind of lack of safety here where you feel
Right.
threatened? And I need to check my behavior. And pretty soon people were like, okay, I'm going to commit to be a better listener. I'm going to commit to be more inquiry oriented rather than advocacy oriented. I'm going to commit to listening more than I speak, or I'm going to commit to practicing more empathy. And now you have this group of people who are committing to some more productive, emotionally intelligent behaviors, and they're sharing it with each other. They're saying they're going to do it. So I just kind of was like, this is amazing. Can you imagine what would happen if you all actually followed through on your commitments? Right? Imagine what would happen. And people started saying, well, I'll feel less afraid. I'll feel more courageous. I'll feel more connected to each other. I will feel more engaged and fulfilled in my role at this company. So I can't promise that that's going to happen. But if we're willing to go down deep under the waterline, say the hard things, often we do get to this point where one person is very vulnerable and it enables others to be vulnerable and courageous. And then we can have a real breakthrough.
Wow. Just that safe space. It was the first thing you said where people have fear or afraid to do something in a workplace. Obviously, you need to get rid of that. You got to get rid of fear. That's got to be the first thing. Like being bored at work or not happy or whatever. Fine. That's one thing. But being afraid at work and not having a safe space, that's huge.
It's
People
huge.
shouldn't live like
Yeah. And yet we all do, right? Because it takes a lot to know how to build a safe space, right? What you might need, Nick, to feel safe at work is going to be really different than what I need, right? So like,
Yep.
how is our manager going to know that, right? We have to be able to ask for what we need. And a lot of us were not raised to ask for what we need. Like a lot of us, particularly Gen X, were raised to be grateful for what you got. Don't ask for what you need. And now like workplaces, people are actually quite, Gen Z in particular is quite emboldened to ask for what they want and demand it. And you got Gen X managers going, gosh, how dare you ask for what you need?
Right.
Like, therein lies the tension, right? So, like, it's really hard to create safe spaces, and we're all afraid. But I think that if we talk about the fear, if one person is willing to say, here's what I'm afraid of, and here's what I need to feel less afraid, it's almost always received with someone leaning in and saying, my gosh, I don't want you to feel afraid, because guess what? I'm also afraid. Let's do this together.
Well, that one person just to start breaking that down, step
Yeah.
forward, take the risk, be vulnerable. It opens the floodgate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, okay, you've written a book as well about
Yeah.
all this fun.
Here it is.
Talk
It's
about
called
that.
Stumbling Towards Inclusion, Finding Grace in Imperfect Leadership. And the reason I called it Stumbling Towards Inclusion is because of what we were just talking about. When we are the person who raises our hand to say the courageous thing, it can be so scary that we stumble. We make a mistake. We fall flat on the face. Like, we've been there, right? You and I have both been there.
Weird in there.
And the road to inclusion is full of these stumbling blocks along the way. And we sometimes mess up relationships and we think, oh gosh, I'm not ever going to be able to repair this one. Like, I really messed it up. And I want my message is, yes, actually, every time you stumble, you learn something new. And not only do you learn something new, you have the opportunity to repair it and restore the relationship that was damaged because of your stumble. Typically, those stumbles are inadvertent. So I want to invite people to recognize that, yes, the task of building inclusive workplaces, whatever you want to call it, safe spaces, courageous spaces, it's all the same to me, is hard, but it's not impossible. If you're willing to make mistakes, you will get there. And it takes an enormous amount of grace, and it takes a willingness to be imperfect to get there. And so in this book, I teach you how to have that grace, how to make those mistakes. What are the predictable mistakes that you are likely to make on your path to building that safe, inclusive environment? And how do you beware proactively of those stumbling blocks? How can you stop yourself from like totally falling flat on your face? And then when you do, how do you repair with yourself and with others?
Wow. That sounds like the book is full of tools.
Yes. So parts 2, 3, and 4 are full of tools and case studies, and here's how to listen. Here's how to ask questions. Here's how to have a productive conversation. Part 1 is my own story and how, like, all the stumbles I made in my life. And here's why it's important to stumble and to actually like tell people about it. Because when you tell people about your stumbles, an amazing thing happens. They go, oh my gosh, me too. I'm not alone. Great. Now I can tell you about my stumbles, and we're in this
Turns
together.
out we're all humans, right?
I know, but we forget that we're allowed. I know, we're allowed to mess up. Yeah.
That's great. Now, did you just write this book? Is this a recent
This was
public?
released on April 16th of this year, 2024.
Yeah. And I assume this is a culmination of your experiences to date and all the knowledge and information you've accumulated through your work.
That's right. So I'm a psychologist by training, and then I got some training to do executive coaching certification. And then I immediately started practicing as an executive coach. And along the way, you have to teach your clients listening, asking questions, giving and receiving feedback. You literally have to teach them how to ask for help. There's so many of us go through life without like feeling comfortable asking for help or accepting help. So like these basic things became my toolkit for coaching. And then when I told you about this story in 2020, when the CEO called us to do the large enterprise level inclusive leadership, I had to develop even more tools. And pretty soon clients were like, okay, Priya, you've taught us all these tools, but there's no manual, there's no playbook. Like, can you just write the book so that I have a reference manual to cheat and I don't have to call you each time? And I thought, okay, what a great opportunity to give my clients what they're asking for, which is a playbook of all these leadership tools that I've learned through coaching and by observing my leaders and the ones that I am so privileged to coach and what I learned from them, and to put it all into a package in the form of a book and say, okay, now you have a reference manual.
It sounds like you're offering the whole package these days. Your clients must be thrilled.
Well, what's amazing is like you think you have a pretty good story, all this material to write a book. Have you written a book?
I've not myself, no. And I find I have the utmost respect for authors because that is such a huge thing.
Yeah, I had no idea. Or like they send you all this stuff. And the thing that is was most surprising to me was when you get your final galley copies, you're like, gosh, there's so much in here. And since I've written this book, I've learned so much more. I've learned enough to write a second book. And I wish I could put all that in the book too, right? But the point is your learning never ends.
Right.
And like,
That's important.
Everything I'm learning, I want to share with my clients. So this is what I've learned up until like January 2023 when I finished writing the book, right? And since then, I've learned so much more. And like some of these tools are evergreen: listening, asking questions, dialogue practices, presence, your presentation of yourself. And I've continued to learn a lot of new things that are not in this version of the book that I continue to share with my clients. So I'm constantly growing and learning from my clients as well.
Taking notes for a second book.
Gosh, we'll see about that.
We'll see about that. All right. The first book took enough out of you, right?
Well, what I am doing is this book has launched my speaking. So I've always done keynotes, but after launching the book, I'm getting a lot more requests. So I'm using the keynotes to share what I've learned beyond the book, right? Here's the message of the book, and here's what I've learned beyond it. So I'm finding other venues to share and to continue to learn myself.
Wonderful. Now, you just didn't show up as a coach one day. I know from speaking to you that there's a lot of education behind where you were originally and where you are today, right? Like you said, you grew up in a small Canadian town as an outsider, and then you did some schooling, went to the States where you are now, and did a lot more schooling. So tell me about that journey.
Yeah, a whole lot more schooling. So you and I both, we discovered that we're both from the same area, right? So like
Right.
outside of Ottawa, and you're in Ottawa now. I grew up in Nepean, born and raised in Nepean, and I was born in 1978. Early 80s, Canada, Ottawa looked very different than it looks today. For example, I was the only brown kid in my school. I know that today that's not the case in Ottawa. Like it's much more diverse.
No.
Right?
Much, yeah. It's every color of the rainbow in the schools these days.
Yeah,
It's great.
exactly. Like it's a whole different world now. But back in like 1982, when I was starting junior kindergarten at the time, it was all white. It was all white. I was new to the kids in my kindergarten classroom. Many of them had never met a brown kid before. And I didn't actually know I was different until a little boy pointed it out to me in the class picture. Like we're like about to have our class picture taken, and he was like, "You're not supposed to be in this picture. You're not like the rest of us." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I shouldn't." Right? So
what?
That's what it was back then, right? We didn't know the concepts of diversity like we do today.
Fair.
I certainly wasn't offended by that. It was just the way life was back then. But you add up these experiences in your life and you pretty much get the message that you're different and some people don't like you because of it. And there's nothing you can do about that way of being different.
So you've had a lot of those experiences?
I did. I had a lot of those kinds of experiences, which is interesting because, I have a sister who didn't have as much of that discriminating experience growing up in Ottawa. She also grew up in Ottawa, of course. Many people will internalize it like I did, and many people will not. It's just how we were born and what we're raised with and how we're conditioned. And as I grew up, this became a little bit of an issue for me. But I will say, like in high school, I started to really struggle. I was doing well in school until I wasn't. And then in high school, I was really struggling. And nobody could explain it. I was failing everything. My parents didn't know what to do about it. And they sent me to India to take my Ontario credits at the time we had OACs, Ontario Academic Credits. Doesn't exist anymore, but that was grade 13, to do my courses by correspondence. And I finally learned work ethic. And they also got me a coach at the time. Nobody had ever heard about a coach, but I had these Indian immigrant parents who had given up everything back home in India to find a life of prosperity here in Canada. And to see their child not succeeding is like a desperate attempt. Okay, we'll do whatever we can to help her. They got me a coach. And I think that introduction to what coaching can do really did change my life. And to
Interesting.
have someone to empower you and who sees you and motivates you and works really hard to understand you was really valuable to me, because I felt like I'd grown up with a lot of people not understanding me. So to have a coach work to understand you, put an effort to see you, was really validating for me. And I held on to that. So I had done well in sports up until then. It made sense for me to go to, college to do phys ed. So that's what I did at Western. It's called kinesiology. And I was encouraged by a professor there to pursue a master's degree. It was a dream to go to Yale. My grades were good enough. I nagged, and I was on the waiting list to get into Yale. I nagged my way in. I was like sending them letters every day, calling them every day, visiting the campus. Who knows if I deserved to get in, but eventually they let me in. And I had 2 great years there. I worked at UNICEF as my internship, made some
Wow.
great connections, had some wonderful professors who really saw something in me and encouraged me to continue studying. One of them said, you should apply to Columbia and you should apply to Harvard and go do your PhD. And I felt really good about that, to have the encouragement of professors who believed in me. And I got into Harvard with my dream professor, Marcelo Suarez Orozco, and I got to move to Cambridge, where I started my PhD. And I studied achievement motivation, like what motivates people to want to achieve in life and overcome their barriers. So that was the coaching part of my brain that was really interested in helping people to, understand what motivates them. And after that, I was lucky enough to do my postdoc at the University of Pennsylvania for 2 years. I studied communications there. And then I came back, and I still was so influenced by the work of other coaches helping me in my life, including people like my swim coach. I told you I was excelled in sports largely because of my swim coach, Paul Jensen, back in Ottawa. And then I had a music coach too, who really inspired me. Like teachers, coaches, they're the people who saw me growing up. And I got a job at Harvard after I graduated. But my mentor said, you teach differently than the rest of us. You don't just expect your students to know the material. You expect them to be better humans when they leave your class. And I think what you're doing is coaching, not teaching. You should go get certified. So that's what I did. I took some time off and I got certified. And in my certification class, I met other coaches, and one of them was starting a business and said, you want to join me? And I was pregnant at the time, and I said, yeah, this will be a great thing to do. When I started total career pivot while I'm pregnant, but it ended up being the best career risk I could have made, because that really launched my coaching career. I learned all about being a better coach, started working with leaders at big Fortune 10 companies. Also learned how to run a business, how to be an entrepreneur, how to sell, how to develop business, how to develop proposals, how to create content, how to develop my own intellectual property and curriculum and workshops, and really found my groove. And then, like I said, in 2016, that firm I was with originally was not diverse. I had been asking us to be more diverse. They didn't know how to do that. And then when 2016, when Trump was elected, I said, okay, if no one else is going to do it, I'll do it. And that's when I started Roundtable.
Wow. So you just said, all right, you said, I'm going to do it. But you literally just took the dive, took the plunge and said, to use swimming terms, you just said, I'm going to do it. Like you just went for it.
I think there comes a time in your career where you have to listen to like the opportunity meeting the desire, right? Like I had this desire that I knew for a long time. I dealt with discrimination in my life as a woman, as a person of color. Through many vectors, I dealt with discrimination. I was like very confident in my ability as a psychologist and as a coach, and in my ability to design workshops and curriculum and to teach. So I was like, this is the opportunity. If I don't listen to it now, I'm gonna miss it again. And I don't know if it'll come back. And at the time in the United States, there was a lot of energy. I think it was called like Pantsuit Nation, right? It's like a lot of energy for people to like start something entrepreneurial that served women and minorities. And a lot of those businesses continue to flourish today. And many of them have, transferred into other things. But I'm really happy that I was part of that wave of new energy to say, you know what, we're going to do something for women. We're going to do something for people of color. We're going to do something for people with disabilities. We're going to do something for the LGBTQIA plus community, etc. And we're going to pay attention and uplift those voices because it looks as though they're going to be dismissed and quieted. It was
Good
like
for
kind
you.
of a resistance movement, I think,
Yeah, I think so. You rose up, you stood up for yourself and for others, and you don't want to have to hear about any other little girls on their picture day being told they don't belong.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Well, at what point did you think you were going to get into coaching? Like, it sounds like you were at Harvard, and that's at the point where you decided you were going to go. Like when you were at Yale, when you started at Harvard, did you have a plan for what you would do afterwards?
I did. When I was at Yale, I'd just done this work at UNICEF. And it was so cool. It was like going to underdeveloped countries, as they called them at the time, and designing psychosocial curriculum for children and youth. And this was like so interesting to me. In fact, my thesis was called Psychosocial Support for Children Living in Unstable Environments. So kids who have been affected by disaster and war and things like this. And I thought, yeah, I want to be the person who goes into these refugee camps and teaches these children, or at least designs the curriculum to help them build resilience, build their basic literacy and numeracy skills. So that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to travel the world and do that. And then when I got to Harvard, that was still interesting to me. And I did my dissertation. I went to Tanzania and I worked with orphans on the street around their psychosocial and achievement motivation environments and dynamics. But, you kind of get swept up. And at the time, everyone in my class was like wanting to be a tenure track professor. So I applied to maybe over 500 tenure track jobs and got like
Wow.
3 interviews and like 3 rejects after those interviews. And then I finally got something at, a smaller university in Boston and came back to Harvard and started teaching there. And I just kept thinking that thing I do one-on-one with people is where I feel most alive, where I feel most of service, where I feel like I'm making the best impact. And then when Bob Selman, my mentor, encouraged me to do it, was all the permission I needed to go forward with that. And I'm really glad I did because I love what I do. I cannot believe I get to do what I do. That every
That's
day I
awesome.
get to, right? Like every day I get to talk with someone and we're working through a challenge and they finish their 50-minute call with a new insight, a new breakthrough, a new learning, some new action that is accelerating their growth towards their potential. Like, what's better than that? Not much, right? To
Yep.
me, it's incredibly fulfilling and challenging. And so I'm just grateful. Like I didn't have the plan to do this. I sort of followed my instinct a long way and was definitely encouraged by mentors who saw something in me and took a chance. Same with that first woman at that consulting firm right after my postdoc. She took a chance on me. I had no business background. She had no business hiring me, but she was like, well, you have this great academic pedigree and you're a psychologist. I have this great business background. Like, what do you think? Maybe we can
Figure it out.
the team. And like, she brought on other people and it was brilliant. And I had a great run there and learned what I needed to do to build Roundtable.
What a great story. And the only piece I'm missing, and I don't know if it's an important piece, but you ended up somehow in Texas after all this.
Yes. What? Why Texas? Yeah.
Good.
Well, I was in Boston at the time. I was married at the
Right?
time. I'm no longer married. My husband at the time was in a career shift and
Okay.
it was an opportunity for us to move. We had 2 young kids. My son was like 3 months old. My daughter was barely 2. And we said, okay, this is our chance to go anywhere in the world. And I said, I can run my business from anywhere. You decide
Right.
what you want to do. And there was this mass exodus from the Northeast to Texas because everybody was like, wow, I can trade in my $500,000 house that is like 1,200 square feet for a 5,000 square foot house for half the price. So everybody's moving to Texas. So we were
All
part of
right.
that wave to move to Texas, lower cost of living, but also work-life balance, like a real focus on family. I was very keen on the kids growing up bi or trilingual. I felt like that would be very accessible here in Texas. And so we moved to Texas in 2014. And so we've been here now 10 years. And I live in Austin, Texas. And Austin is full of either you're like a local, you've been here for life, or you're a transplant. And the transplant community for me has been my home. We're a bunch of people from all over the world, and we are each other's families. And I love that. Like the community I've built here is unlike any other community I've ever had anywhere I've lived, and I've lived all over the world. But it's the sort of place where I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I need your help. Can you come over? And somebody will be over in 5 minutes, and I'll be there
That's
for them
great.
too. And it's all I've ever wanted, is that sort of community and family. Like it's my chosen family. And we have kids around the same age, and I feel really secure in that community. But I will say, like, I'm Canadian in my heart. I miss Canada so much. I think about it so much. My parents are still there, especially when there is like a school shooting here in the States. I'm like, that's it. I'm coming back to Canada. Or whenever I have to like pay a healthcare bill, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back to Canada. But the pull of community here is so strong. Ultimately, we end up places where we feel held and cared for by the people around us and by strong friendships. And I have that here, and I worked really hard to build that. The thought of going back to Canada and rebuilding all that feels exhausting at the age of 46. I'm not saying it'll never happen. You know, my kids are 11 and 13, and we're settled here, and it feels really good to have the support of great friends here in Texas.
That sounds so interesting. So not only do you help people make their workplaces inclusive and diverse, but you're part of a community that is also the same way, inclusive of everyone, and I assume diverse
Yeah.
by the nature of everyone coming from all over the place.
Yeah, it's very diverse. I've learned is a personal value of mine, right? If I am going to teach this to my clients, I'm living it too, right? Like the proof is in how I live my life. That's leadership. I got to be a role model in my life. I have to be congruent and be in integrity with the things that I teach to my clients. And I'm really fortunate and really lucky that I ended up having such a diverse range of friends here. My kids go to a school where they speak English, Spanish, and Mandarin. Their friends
Wow.
are global. It's a reflection of my personal values and the way my parents raised us. Like my parents were also very global, lived all around the world. They lived in Asia, the Middle East, and Europe and North America. I traveled all around the world. I had the privilege to do that. And so it's a product of that upbringing and that personal value.
Wow, that's so neat. So you can appreciate the benefits and the feeling of that safety of being in an environment that is exactly what you're preaching, right? With like I said, the inclusiveness and the diversity, the feeling that you get when you're in your community. Like you said, you can pick up the phone and call anyone, and they'll come over, right? Because that's how much of a tight knit group that you are in your community. You have that feeling. You understand what that's like. So you want other people to have that, certainly in their
Yeah.
workplace.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's also very much supported by the empirical research that like our well-being is better, our longevity is better when we are surrounded by friends, by people we can truly trust and who trust us. We know that we live longer lives because of our friendships, right? And it's not about the money we make, or it's like shockingly not even about our physical health, right? Like, to some degree it is, but it's mostly we're friends. Yeah.
It makes sense, right? If you live in a state of fear, if you're fearful in your workplace, you don't feel safe, there's negativity, you feel like you're being oppressed, you feel like you're not being heard. yeah, that's going to weigh on you. That is going to affect your mental health, which affects your physical health, which
Yeah.
I expect would affect your longevity as well.
Yeah, that is the stake I put in the ground. That's like, as long as the work I do continues to spread and amplify that message, then I'm doing work I love and I'm doing work that I think is interesting and important.
Keep doing that. Keep
Thanks.
doing what you do. It sounds like it's really good. It sounds like it's changing the world for good. You stood up because you said, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm
Yeah.
going to be part of the wave of change and I'm going to make the change. And
Yeah.
good for you. And it's so great that you had all those people along the way that encouraged you and inspired you. Clearly that sounds like it made a big difference.
Yeah. None of us are alone. None of us are alone on this, right? Like, I am the product of parents, my mentors, my sister, my kids. Like, I'm the product of all of the relationships I've had, even the
Right?
bad ones, right?
Yes.
There's no way I could say I got here alone. What does that even mean, right? Like, and I'll continue to get to where I am because of new friendships and relationships and experiences that I have. We're all a product of all of that.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. You get where you are from your experiences. And if you're seeing success, it's built on the shoulders of others. And not because you're stepping on them, because they're pushing you up.
Yeah, 100%. And I have that feeling. I'm 46 now, but a couple of years ago, I had that feeling like, okay, it's my turn now to like uplift others and like really
Okay.
deliberately go out of my way and like identify the people that I want to invest in and push up the way mentors have done to me. So that's extremely rewarding to be in that position too.
And I'll tell you, Priya, I think I can appreciate, I don't know if it's sad, but I can appreciate the white CEO that approached you not knowing how to deal with his Black employees. I mean, if you're listening to this on audio, you can't tell maybe necessarily, but I'm definitely a white guy. I'm the white male, right? So I haven't experienced racism. I haven't experienced the fear of walking down a street at night because I'm a woman, and I haven't had that. Perhaps it's made me a little ignorant in terms of the needs of others and people who
Sure.
do have to put up with those things on a daily basis. I don't have the same appreciation. Like, we grew up in the same city, but we had different experiences, right? So all that stuff that you had to deal with growing up and all those things that made you jump up and say, hey, I'm going to make that change. I didn't have that. And I always hate to hear that people had to deal with that.
Yeah.
My problem is I don't know how to fix that. I should read your book. I should get a better understanding of what it's like to be in other people's shoes and to better understand what they're going through so that hopefully I can make whatever space I'm in with other people safe and inclusive.
I really appreciate that. I think it really does start with that awareness to say, hey, this is not my experience, but I am willing to listen. I'm willing to learn. I'm going to actively learn. Like you saying, I'm going to read your book now. Like, this is how it starts. This change starts because we make a decision to learn and have our perspective changed. So this particular CEO, I just want to like close the loop on what happened with him. He was scared to start, but he did the same thing you just did, which is like, I want to learn. I want to learn and I want to actively get engaged. In this book, I've shared a allyship continuum. Like, where do you start? It starts with like, okay, you make a decision to start somewhere. And when you're an ally, what it means is that, okay, it's no longer just your struggle, Priya. It's my struggle too. Even though I am a white man, the
Right.
struggle you're going through is my struggle. And that's what it means to be an ally. It's no longer like, how can I help you? No, struggle of oppression is mine despite my social identity. And that's where he got, like in 3 years. And this is his legacy. That was a turning point for me in my life. And now I can teach others about it.
So great. I have a friend, really smart guy. He'll tell you, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Totally. Yeah.
I might know a lot about one thing. Clearly, I don't know a lot about other subjects. And it's like you said, right? You have to be consistently and constantly learning, so that we're growing as people. And just getting a better understanding of the world and the people around us. It's not something that's just happening to other people. It's
That's right.
our world. It's our community. It's
Us. Yeah.
every workplace, right? It's happening all around us all the time. So we need to be aware. And I'm saying that to remind myself that this is important. And
Mm.
this is something that I need to be more mindful of and be aware of. I live in a very diverse neighborhood. I think it's great. We're all different colors. I think it's fantastic, but I don't have an appreciation for maybe some of the journeys that they've had to go through. And maybe that's part of the next step of my evolution, my growth is
Maybe.
where I need
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah. What I have found is being part of conversations where people can share who they are, including you sharing who you are, can be incredibly healing for everybody, right? It's this sort of conversation where
Right?
I think that we change our worlds through conversation. So
Yeah.
inviting, and it's not always easy. It can be scary. It can require courage. But
Sure.
courage leads to vulnerability, which leads to intimacy. And this is how we build connections with each other.
Absolutely. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you, like every guest that I have on my podcast, I learn from. And I love that.
Hmm.
I love that I'm learning from people. I'm hearing their stories, but it's more than just a story. It's I'm hearing their growth experience. And from that, I'm getting a better understanding of what it took to get from point A to point B in that person's journey. Same as yourself, from the little girl in that junior kindergarten classroom to who you are today. You're a much different person, clearly, but it's all the great stuff that you've done along the way. What made you who you are, all those experiences, all that growth. It's great. I love it. I try to absorb as much as I can so I have a better understanding of someone. So I try to hear the stories. I try to
It's
hear
great.
people
Yeah. It's so
better,
great.
better appreciate.
It's so great that you have this platform. And people listening, they get the benefit of hearing the stories too and hearing your questions, that you're coming from a place of real curiosity with your questions.
Right.
And that I hope that people see that, like, just being curious about others is a real gift.
Yeah, that's my thing. I'm curious by nature. I love asking questions. I've driven a lot of people crazy just asking them and tell people, look, I'm not questioning you. I'm asking you. I'm trying to understand. So if I
Yeah.
say, hey, how come you're doing this? I'm not saying, how come you're doing this because you're doing it wrong? I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand what the logic is, what your thinking is behind it so that I can better understand your process.
I
Right?
love that. That's what I teach my clients. Like, tell people what your intention is, right? That's what you're doing. Like, here's my intention. I am wanting to learn about you. And that's why I'm asking you all these questions. And grown-ups will tell you if they don't want to be asked anymore, right? That's the beauty of
Fair, fair.
questions, right? So it does take a risk to do that. So I love that framing.
Like, so what's next for you?
Well,
What's the
right
next?
now we're doing quite a bit of enterprise level work. We're working with some scientific societies here, which is very exciting work. I am doing a lot more keynotes. So 2025 is looking like a lot of conference keynotes, company wide keynotes, which I love doing. I love getting up there and sharing the stories of my clients, but also my story and the lessons I've learned along the way. So the path is looking like a lot of talks, and I'm going to continue coaching. I coach C-level executives. My team coaches all levels, and I have some dreams of taking this on the road, going international with this, and doing
Okay.
international retreats in like really cool places, and curating groups of leaders together to do hard work together in like the Swiss Alps while we're hiking. And so that's like a dream I have, 5-10 year dream or something like that, because I think that the environment we're in also impacts the way we think and relate to each other. And I same way I've had this thing about racial injustice in my head and repairing and restoring and working on that. I've also had this thing about climate change in my head. So if there's a way that my work can intersect with sustainability, that's like a frontier I would love to cross and learn about.
Wow. You're going to tackle it all.
Well, we'll
No
see.
messing around.
Why not? Right? You have one life. Why not?
Exactly, right? Why stop anywhere and just keep
Yeah.
going? Yeah, just keep
Yeah.
building. Okay, now, just quick little thing. It's been my impression that 2024 has been the year where we've gotten back to, we'll say, normal in terms of events and people going out and doing things. And I feel like when I'm out and about, when I'm doing things, when I'm at events, when I'm looking at things coming up in the calendar, it just seems like we're back to the levels that we were at pre-pandemic, where people are comfortable going out again. It's just normal. We just go out, we do things. I'm saying that reminded me because you were talking about how your 2025 looks like you have a lot of conferences and keynote addresses. So it sounds like corporations are getting to doing these conferences, back to having keynotes and events. And is that your impression as well?
Yeah, I've been noticing that too. You know, before the pandemic, I used to travel a lot for work, and then obviously that shut down during the pandemic. I think that the virtual offering is not going to go away. Still doing a ton of virtual work, and a lot of clients still really want that and love that, and they can reach more of their global offices virtually.
Of course.
I do think, though, the in-person, while, there's definitely more conferences and events happening in person now, and it's more normalized, to your point, I still think that people are recognizing how special it is, because we didn't have that for a few years,
Yes.
right? So they're like, oh, look, isn't it great that we can have a round table in person? So people are not
Right.
taking that time for granted, or the value of being in person. They're really seeing it as a gift, which I kind of love, right? Like, we can go really deep in roundtable now,
Yeah.
because people are like,
Yeah.
this may not last. We may not have this, this time to
Better appreciation. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people are more
Yeah.
grateful and appreciative of that time together, which I kind of love. And I'm like, we're setting clear boundaries in our business around how much virtual, how much in person we're going to do. We're not going to go back to how much in person we were doing. I was on the road like every 3 days. It was a little too much. Plus, thinking about my carbon footprint, I want to be very mindful of that. So we're still doing a lot of hybrid work, a lot of virtual stuff, and then I'm on the road for like these big keynotes.
Yeah. To me, it just seems like we're able to get back together, do
Yeah,
these things in person, build those connections again, make it more intimate. But of course, now we have the benefit of being able to have that work-life balance where we can be flexible.
yes,
We're not necessarily, it's in person or never, right?
yeah,
Now it's in person. We can do a virtual. We have more options.
and more options. That's right. And we've really figured out how to have a really powerful, intimate experience online too. I'm really glad that we've figured out how to do that. Because now people are like, oh, virtual is like a really viable option for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to me, it makes sense. I mean, look, the pandemic wasn't fun for anyone. Of course not. Did terrible things come out of it? Yes. But did some good things come out of it as well? I think so. I think it really accelerated the acceptance of virtual work,
Yeah.
and then hybrid workplaces. We had the tools, we just weren't using them and adopting them quickly enough. And when you're
Totally.
forced to adopt them, no choice, right?
Yeah. And we've gotten really clear on things like the the stress impact on our commutes. Like, we really understand what that means now. And we have more flexibility in our workplaces now because of that,
Yeah.
which breeds more inclusion. So you're right. A lot of good stuff has come out of it. The DEI, there was like a big surge of DEI work right during the pandemic. And then it started to like
Yeah.
waver it, but it's not going away, thanks to like a lot of the awareness we built up during the pandemic. So I think it's going to continue to surge up. And it's just inclusive leadership work, diversity, equity, inclusion work is not going away.
I
Yeah.
agree with you. Whatever happened, whatever we've been through, this is now the new normal. And
That's
there's a
right.
lot of benefits to it. Like you said, the whole commute thing, it turned out, oh, we don't have to suffer a couple hours in the car every day
No.
necessarily. We can be more flexible.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of benefits for sure. I hope, of course, all the workplaces adopt some sort of system or programs that are good for everyone and don't just say, like I heard Amazon's having everyone come back to the office. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't read into it. I don't know if that makes sense or not, or if they're just blanket saying that everyone has to come back. We don't care. You guys aren't productive at home, or for whatever the reasoning is. I hope there's some sort of thought behind it, and it's not just a statement that's for the sake of having everyone come back.
Yeah. That's one of the things where challenged by too as coaches. It's work from home policies is definitely a hot topic. Another hot
Huge.
topic, like the generational polarization between like boomers, Gen X, Gen Z,
Yes.
millennials. Like that is a big hot topic for us right now too. Yeah.
It's big right now because everyone's going back to kind of the new normal. A lot of the executives and corporations saying, okay, we're back to normal. Let's get everyone back to the office. And everyone's saying, whoa, no, that genie's out of the bottle. You can't
Yes.
get
Yeah.
back in.
Totally. Totally.
Pandora's box is open. You can't just go back. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. This is normal. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, Priya, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you telling me your whole story. Man, is there a lot of good stuff in there? It's given me personally a lot of things to reflect upon, which is great. I'm going to have to read your book. I'm going to have to keep my growth going, keep my understanding, keep doing the work you're doing. It sounds like you're making the world a better place. And
Thank you.
you can't fault you for that.
Thank you
highly
for the
encourage it.
opportunity. For the opportunity to share my work, share my story, for your questions. I love all of it. If I could just put in a little plug, for people who are interested in learning more about their own inclusive journey, we have an inclusivity assessment on our website. It's priyanalkur.com. They can go to that and do that assessment. It's free. But you get like a pretty cool report. Like if you're interested in learning what type of leader you are, you get a very comprehensive report on that. So I would invite, whoever's listening to take that assessment and learn a little bit more.
Fantastic. I will put your websites in the description for the episode, so people can easily click on the link and go to your website, priyanalkur.com, the Roundtable Institute as well.
Awesome.
And show them how to get your book at the same time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Take care, Priya.
You too.